Minister's daily update on the federal response to the pandemic. But of course, we are also at this hour tracking breaking news out of Nova Scotia. RCMPs say they now have a shooting suspect in custody. The suspect had been on the run for several tense hours following what is being described as a violent incident in a small community near Truro. We don't know a lot more, but we will expect the Prime Minister might likely address this situation now that the suspect is in custody. Let's begin with that breaking news story in Nova Scotia. Shayna Luck joins me from Great Village. That's close to where some of this morning's events unfolded. And this has been going on for hours, Shayna. What can you tell us about how it's played out?
Well, Rosie, as you said, the suspect, we know from RCMP that Gabriel Wortman is now in custody. And we know that he has been on the run for approximately 12 hours. The RCMP tell us that he was tracked down between here and Halifax. We last know that he was seen traveling on Highway 102. That's the highway, the major highway that runs between here and the city, about 45 kilometers away from where I am. And he was last seen traveling in a small silver SUV. We had heard from police that he might have been wearing an RCMP uniform, or what looked like an RCMP uniform. At one point, he was also traveling, they believed, in a car that looked like an RCMP car. But the RCMP put out a heavy presence on that highway, and they were able to apprehend him. Probably, we first got word of that maybe just 20 minutes ago. Now, we do know that this came out of some kind of incident that happened last night around 11:30. That happened in the town just about 10 minutes up the road from me. It's called Portapic. It's a small community. We know that there are multiple victims. We don't know how many. We also don't know how badly they are injured. And we do expect that there will be an update from the RCMP at some point this afternoon. But for now, we know the suspect is in custody. Rosie?
So many unusual parts to this story. Thankfully, he is now in custody, as you say, Shayna. But the fact that he did seem to be impersonating or pretending to be an RCMP officer, the RCMP gave a lot of information about that as well.
Yes, that's right. We do know from the RCMP that he is not actually an RCMP officer. We don't know a lot about how exactly he came to have that RCMP vehicle and RCMP uniform, whether they are actually legitimate articles. We do know that he is not, though, an RCMP employee. CBC has been able to confirm that he is a denturist. So, as Rosie, as you say, this is a very bizarre story and certainly still unfolding.
Okay, Shayna, come back to us the minute you get any sort of update. Appreciate that. So the CBC's Shayna Luck reporting from Great Village, Nova Scotia. Just to remind you then a little bit about how that unfolded, starting at 11:30 last night near Portapic. There was a tweet from the RCMP telling people that there was a situation unfolding, telling them that there was an active shooter. Earlier this morning, telling them to stay in their homes and go to their basements in order to stay safe. There was a lot of communication between local RCMP on the ground via Twitter and other means to try and make sure that residents didn't get hurt further. They now say that the suspect, Gabriel Wortman, is in custody, that they did manage to apprehend him somewhere there along the highway near Truro, Nova Scotia. And again, we do know that there are multiple victims. We do not know if they are injured or have been killed, but we will expect the RCMP in Nova Scotia to update us the moment we hear more about that situation. So obviously, important breaking news out of Nova Scotia. We'll continue to track it. But at this hour, we are also expecting to hear from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau doing his daily briefing to the nation around his government's response to COVID-19. So let's bring in David Cochran with that part of the story. I would expect that the Prime Minister will probably say something about this incident in Nova Scotia first, and maybe give us some details if he has any, David. What else are we expecting from him today?
Well, I'm not sure we're going to get much in the way of a significant news announcement today, but the big news that's happening here in Ottawa is the negotiations happening behind the scenes with all of the parties to try to figure out what to do about the House of Commons, which is due to come back tomorrow in full force, with all 338 MPs scheduled to come back and take their seats in the middle of a pandemic, an outcome that nobody is super keen to have at all. There are negotiations on the go for reduced sittings with reduced numbers, but they're not all the way done yet. What we can tell you is that the Liberals and the New Democrats have reached an agreement in the last 20 minutes, as far as I can tell, that they would get the support of the NDP, the Liberals would, to have one sitting this week with a lot of time dedicated to question period, sort of the equivalent of a week of question period happening in one sitting, then move to one in-person sitting and one virtual sitting by next week, and then the week after that, one in-person sitting and two virtual sittings, and then that would then become the template for the House of Commons and how it would function going forward. This is a move from the Liberals, who wanted one sitting and one virtual sitting as sort of the baseline each week. They've agreed to go up to two to satisfy the New Democrats. The Green and the Bloc Québécois, as I understand it, would be willing to go along with this. The issue is getting the Conservatives to agree. Andrew Scheer is keen to have Parliament come back and resume its normal function in what are abnormal times with a reduced sitting, something like what we saw before when they've passed legislation of 30 to 40 MPs, mostly from around the Ottawa area. The Conservatives started with a request or a demand, depending on how you want to describe it, for 4 in-person sittings. As the negotiations have gone on, they've countered with 3 in-person sittings. The Liberals, the New Democrats, the Greens, the Bloc, they do not want to go to that because you can reduce the number of MPs, but you need custodians, you need security, you need translators, you need broadcasters, you need clerks, you need political staff. So dozens and dozens of people will go into the West Block. And even last time with the reduced sittings, Elizabeth May and others complained that when you left your seats, there's lots of seats, but when you go out back into the lobby where you make your phone calls and do your work, it's just too crowded with political staffers and support staff for people to safely social distance. So this is the behind-the-scenes conversations that are happening right now in Ottawa. What is the compromise? It seems 4 of the parties have largely found an agreement to function. The Conservatives are not on board with that yet, and we're going to hear from Andrew Scheer a little bit later this afternoon to see what he has to say on this.
And I realize for people that you know, that's a lot of days and a lot of information about what's trying to go on here. But I mean, essentially, they're trying to find a way for parliamentarians to do their work in some capacity inside the House of Commons, and for the government to answer questions and be held to account for decisions that it's making. It is vitally important. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. It's just a matter of how they figure this out and what is the best way to represent Canadians inside the House. Yeah,
look, everything is suspended and paused and put on hold, but democracy hasn't been abandoned in Canada. And, you know, the House would normally sit 5 days a week with people flying in from all over the country. There's just no way for that to happen safely and practically. So the Liberals wanted to have just one sitting day a week and then with an online virtual day. The Conservatives wanted 4 sitting days. They're trying to find a solution for everybody. And you can understand the impulse of the Conservatives of wanting to have an opportunity to question the Prime Minister and the Minister and the various ministers. I mean, we're up to almost $300 billion in aid that has been put on the table by the government. You know, a full year's budget is normally about $350 billion, so they've done almost a year of spending in a matter of 4 or 5 weeks as the urgent needs caused by COVID-19, you know, keep expanding and growing, and more people are captured by these programs. But we've seen Andrew Scheer, he's come back to Ottawa with his family, he's holding daily news conferences. And his argument is that this is necessary to hold the government to account by asking clear and specific questions about whether they're slow to respond to the pandemic, whether they're slow to close the border, slow to buy equipment. This is what he wants to do. The other parties, though, do not agree with the Conservative leader's demand for the sheer volume of in-person sittings that he is looking for. Well, he says it's an urgent principled matter. They say it's an urgent public health matter. And that's where the argument is sort of breaking down right now.
Okay, David, I will come back to you shortly if you don't mind. I'm going to go back to our top story at this hour. A suspect is in custody after an active shooter investigation. The suspect's name is Gabriel Wortman. He has been taken into custody by Nova Scotia RCMP probably within the last 30 minutes. But this all started to unfold yesterday evening. And Mike McKay is a resident of Port-a-Pic, Nova Scotia, and he's been up all night as he says multiple homes around his are on fire. And he joins us now over the phone. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, a little tired.
Yeah, I bet. So when did this start for you? Was it last night, and what were you told?
It was around 10:30 or 11 o'clock last night. We noticed police cars, and then we noticed the house fire. And then there were 2 more fires after that. we're assuming were houses as well. And with not much information, we were a little concerned until this morning when we heard stay inside. So we've pretty much bunkered in for the time being.
Yeah. And did they appear to be large house fires? What can you tell me about what you saw?
Pretty large house fires, yes, and some explosions. Gas tanks or propane tanks and what have you. And with no firefighters, to be seen because of the other, activity that we were unaware of at the time. So
yeah. And do you know the residents of the homes? I don't know how much you could see in terms of what house was affected.
We know a couple for sure that were kind of visible from our yard, but the third we don't know for sure. But scary, I guess.
Yeah, I can't imagine. And when you woke up this morning and you found out that it was an active shooter investigation, and you
we
were
didn't
told
wake up this morning. We were up all night.
Oh, you were up all night. Fair enough. Well, when
Yes.
you got word that that's what was actually happening, and they told you to stay in your basement, I can't imagine what that must have been like.
Well, we don't have a basement, so we're still on the main floor, and
Right.
concerned again, not knowing for sure what or who to be looking out for. So we didn't get a lot of information until this morning. So
Do you know the suspect? Does his name
No.
sound? No. You said that you knew the other houses. Have you been in contact with anyone in the other homes to see if they're okay?
no, just seeing from where we're at, we can just seeing the knowing where things are, but.
And what is the presence like right now in Portapique now that the suspect's in custody?
It's still pretty quiet here. Haven't seen much traffic on the road or anything, but we'll just have to wait and see, I guess.
And so have police left, or there are police still there securing areas?
From what we know, they're still here. So, and I'm sure there'll be investigations after this.
I'm sure. Give people. I don't myself know much about Portapique, Mike. So give us a sense of how big or small it is, how rural it is.
Very rural, very small community. On the water, it's kind of cottage country here. Nice area, beautiful area, and but houses are spread out. A lot of trees, so you can be in the blind, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah. We also have heard, and I'm sure you have now too, that the suspect was maybe wearing an RCMP uniform, may have had some sort of car that looked like an RCMP car. How worrying is that?
Well, that's pretty scary for for the people not knowing, and then him showing up on a doorstep. He could have went in any house he wanted, pretty much. People thinking he was police, so that is scary.
Totally. And how many people are in Portapique?
A few hundred. I'm not 100% sure. Just it's not a huge population, but we're between two other small communities. So.
And the people in town, they are all safe and okay?
As far as we know, yes.
Yeah. A strange time too. I mean, you're obviously staying at home because of the pandemic, and now this happens.
We're just locked in a little longer.
I know. It's quite. So, I gather you're relieved that that the man appears to be in custody now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Certainly, as a lot of people will be, I'm sure.
Yes, indeed. Okay, Mike, thanks for talking to us even after a very long night. Hope you get time to have a nap at some point, and hope everybody there is safe. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that's Mike McKay from Portapique, Nova Scotia. He is one of the residents of that town, small town, as you heard Mike saying there. And it was in that town just last night that they first got word that there was some sort of situation unfolding at around 11:30 p.m. local time. And it did appear to be, according to the RCMP anyway, an active shooter situation. We do not know very much about the situation as of yet, but police say there are multiple victims. They won't say whether those people are injured or killed. And they worked for about 12 hours or so to locate the suspect, a man by the name of Gabriel Wortman, who, as you heard me asking of Mike there, appeared to be dressed like an RCMP officer and in a car that appeared almost to be a replica of an RCMP vehicle, even though he is not a member of the RCMP. He is a dentist of some kind, a denturist of some kind. They were very worried for people's safety, the RCMP at the time, telling them to stay within their homes, that he was, quote, armed and dangerous. He has been, in the last 30 minutes, though, picked up and brought into custody by the RCMP. We will await more details about what the RCMP can tell us about potential victims and, of course, any information about why this may have happened. So we'll bring that to you as soon as we get it, obviously. Continue to follow that story in Nova Scotia. But we are, as we do at this hour, waiting for the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, to emerge from his home. There it is. You're familiar with his front door by now, Rideau Cottage. Where he will bring us up to date on his government's moves to contain and combat COVID-19. And he will also, I would imagine, likely speak to the situation that has now been, for now, it would seem, resolved in Nova Scotia. I'll bring in David Cochrane as we stand by and wait for the Prime Minister. So you brought us up to date on the parliamentary negotiations.
I have a slight update on that, Rosie, because I have been in contact with Elizabeth May, and to clarify the Greens' position, they are only in favor of sitting in person if there's a compelling reason, such as passing legislation. They don't want to sit at all just to have a question period. She says these can be done virtually, that can be done over Zoom, and that bringing everybody together just to have an in-person question period, in the Greens' opinion and in Ms. May's opinion, sends the wrong message to Canadians, that the government is telling everybody to stay home except us being members of Parliament, she says. So she is saying that they want to go virtual as quickly and as often as possible, and use that as the government accountability methods, despite the glitches and stuff they've had with the technology on some of the committee hearings. But for them, they say once a week with a small group of MPs constitutes an unreasonable risk and sends the wrong message to Canadians that everyone should stay home except members of Parliament. So there's an agreement with the New Democrats for one in-person sitting with a couple of virtual sessions, but the Greens still don't want any in-person unless it's required to vote and pass legislation, as we saw with wage subsidy and business help, for example.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they've done it before, sort of curious that they wouldn't be able to find a way to do it again. And again, we are expecting to hear from the Speaker this week about where they are at in terms of virtual sittings. But we know, even from press conferences, some cabinet ministers forget to unmute their microphones. So you can imagine a situation where you have people trying to talk over one another. I'm sure it's possible. I'm just not sure how easy it will be and whether it'll be, sort of the best demonstration of accountability for everyone involved. And I should point out that their agree to suspend only goes until tomorrow, so they do have to reach some sort of agreement before the day is over. And as we've seen throughout this pandemic, they do tend to reach agreement, but they tend to do it right at the very last minute. Yeah. Okay. I think Mr. Trudeau, the Prime Minister, is about to come out in about a minute's time. Again, we are expecting him to perhaps bring us up to date on those negotiations about the return of the House of Commons. He'll certainly be asked questions about it, but we would also expect him to address the situation that now appears, anyway, to be under control in Nova Scotia, where a suspect has been taken into custody. He was an active shooter, the RCMP say, and they are talking about multiple victims. Again, we don't know the extent of that, but perhaps the Prime Minister will have more to tell us right now.
Bonjour tout le monde. Before we get started, I want to touch briefly on the unfolding events in Portapique, Nova Scotia. I know we've all been watching this on the news. My hearts go out to everyone affected in what is a terrible situation. I want to thank the police for their hard work and people for cooperating with authorities.
I'd like to speak briefly about the situation unfolding right now in Portapique, Nova Scotia. I know we've all been following the news, and I want you to know that our hearts go out to all those affected by this event. I want to thank the authorities for their good work and everyone else for their cooperation. This morning, I also want to wish a happy Orthodox Easter to those celebrating today. Even if you do it on Skype, I hope you can spend this special day with your family and friends.
Happy Orthodox Easter to everyone who's celebrating today. Even if it's just over Skype, I hope you can spend this special day with family and friends. Although this pandemic has affected everyone, some people have been hit especially hard. Right now, too many Canadians are facing some really difficult situations. If you live with a disability, I don't have to tell you what this can look like. You might be worried about whether your support worker will be able to keep coming. You might be concerned about getting groceries or about your finances. And if you're caring for someone with a disability, you're probably anxious about getting support too. Your voice matters. Your experience is important. And our government is listening. If this crisis has laid bare the gaps that still exist for far too many Canadians, it has also given us an opportunity to address them. It has encouraged us to have even more meaningful conversations about how we can make our country a more inclusive and a more equitable place. Last week, Minister Qualtrough launched a COVID-19 Disability Advisory Group as part of our plan to keep all Canadians healthy, informed, and safe. We're addressing key issues like equal access to health care and information, as well as support on jobs and income. And we're doing all of this work with you at the table. On that note, I want to recognize the outstanding organizations right across the country, like the Rick Hansen Foundation, that are bringing these issues to the fore. You are doing incredible work, and we are proud to be your partner.
Last week, Minister Qualtrough launched the Disability Advisory Group. That is part of our plan to help everyone to stay healthy and safe. We are facing an unprecedented situation, and we are now looking at the most important issues, such as equal access to health care and information. We also want to provide financial support to those who need it, and we have put measures in place to protect jobs. This is work we're doing together. I want to thank all the leaders and organizers around the country that are drawing our attention to particular challenges that the most vulnerable Canadians are facing. You are doing an extraordinary job, and we are there to be your full partner.
In response to this pandemic, we've developed a 3-point economic plan to help Canadians get through this tough time. We introduced the Canada Emergency Response Benefit to help people who've lost their wages. We brought in new loans for businesses, and we introduced the wage subsidy. But there is still work to do. There are still people to reach. That's why this past week, we expanded the Canada Emergency Response Benefit to include workers making up to $1,000 a month, seasonal workers, and those whose EI has recently run out. It's why we put in place new measures to support people in the energy industry, which is suffering right now. And we also brought in support for people who continue to do incredible work in the arts, culture, and sports communities. And it's why we've kept making progress with the provinces and territories on increasing wages for essential workers who need it. Now, things are tough for employers, too. So we brought in a whole range of additional support on loans and credit, and for Indigenous businesses and businesses in the North. And for communities that need extra support, we approved requests to have the Canadian Armed Forces assist in Quebec long-term care facilities, as well as in Nunavik and in Basse-Côte-Nord. Today, I can announce that we've also approved the extension of a request from the Government of Quebec for the Canadian Rangers to help Nutashquan and Equanichit First Nations near Basse-Côte-Nord. All these measures we've brought in are about helping you do the things that will get us through this. And it's working. We're seeing the numbers trend in the right direction. So we need to keep doing what we're doing and keep being extremely careful. And we will get through this together. Depuis le début de la crise,
from the beginning of the crisis, we have been announcing historic measures with the emergency benefit, the wage subsidy, and the loans to small businesses. We are helping millions of families and workers and entrepreneurs. But there are still people we need to help. So this week, We extended support through the benefit. We put in place new measures for energy sector workers, a sector particularly hard hit by the epidemic. And we also want to help people who are doing an extraordinary job in the arts and culture and sports communities. At the same time, we're working with the provinces and territories to increase the wages of essential workers who need more support. And of course, this is also a difficult period for employers. Therefore, we introduced a whole series of additional measures, including loans and contributions to businesses, including for Indigenous and Northern businesses. And for those communities that need a little bit more help, we have approved requests for the Canadian Armed Forces to be deployed to Quebec in long-term care homes and in Nunavik and the Lower North Shore. Today, I can also announce that the Rangers will be helping other communities in Quebec, the Nutashquan community and the Aquanichit community. We introduced all of these different measures to allow you to follow the recommendations of our healthcare experts and help us to fight this virus. And it's working. The numbers show that we're moving in the right direction. So we must continue to stay home and be cautious. And together, we will get through this. Having said that, even if we are pointing out certain encouraging trends, we must not delude ourselves. Right across this country, there are thousands of families going through terrible times because of this pandemic. I just want to take a moment to express my deep condolences to those who are mourning. All Canadians share your sadness, and they stand with you during this terrible ordeal. Know that the government is there for you, and we will come through these difficult times together. We cannot see this news without thinking of the seniors in their residences that can't see their children, that can't see their grandchildren except on FaceTime, and who are afraid, who see the news and hear about what's happening in seniors' homes across the province and across the country. And they're worried as to whether they will ever see their children or grandchildren again. It's extremely hard, and we must do everything we can for them by working together, but also by making it clear that everyone has to continue to stay home. We have to continue to slow the spread of this virus, and together we will get through this.
And because it's Sunday, I want to end again by talking directly to all the kids who might be watching. This week is National Volunteer Week. That means we say thank you to everyone around us doing things like helping seniors get groceries or putting in a shift at a food bank. You can join in from home, too. Ask your parents if you can help them make dinner and do extra cleaning around the house. Help your brother or sister with schoolwork. Say hi over FaceTime to your grandparents who I know are missing you. Young and young at heart, we can all make a real difference. I heard a great story the other day about a restaurant in Nova Scotia, the Canteen. They've turned the restaurant into a community kitchen where people pitch in and get meals to those in need. And there have been thousands of Canadians who've already signed up through our national COVID-19 volunteer recruitment campaign to lighten the load on our frontline workers. Everyone can help out. Everyone can help us get through this. À tous les enfants qui sont à la maison.
To all the children who are now at home, don't forget that we need you. Ask your parents if you can help them prepare a meal or help with the cleaning. Help your brother or your sister with their homework. Say hello on FaceTime to your grandparents who miss you. We are all able to do our best and make this a better place. And at this time, as we're facing a challenge like we've never seen before, we all have a chance to contribute. But I know that we will all continue to do our part. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre. On va maintenant passer à la période de questions, en commençant par le téléphone. Modérateur, c'est à vous.
Merci. Merci. Thank you. First question, Michelle Carbert from the Globe and Mail. Your line is open. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Thanks for taking our questions. My question is with regards to the government's decision to tighten the scrutiny of foreign takeovers of Canadian firms impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Why is this decision important, and why did you take this decision a month after European countries started doing this?
We recognize that countries around the world are looking at their own regimes and recognizing that there are vulnerable businesses that are going to be important to our recovery, who are perhaps exposed to foreign purchases in a vulnerable time, that we need to be careful we're taking care of. So we will be strengthening our oversight and paying close attention to foreign investment in this country to ensure that there isn't people taking advantage of this crisis.
We recognize that it's important in these times of economic slowdown and vulnerability for many businesses that there are not people or companies overseas that are trying to take advantage of this situation to buying and investing in Canadian companies which normally would not be vulnerable to that type of takeover. And that's why we are talking about just how important these measures are to ensure the protection of our industries and our economy.
And as a follow-up, are you aware of any foreign takeover deals that are coming or have occurred since the pandemic? And are there any sectors you're concerned about?
I think we've highlighted that certainly as we look at challenges around supply chains for essential medical supplies and personal protective equipment, as we strengthen our own domestic industry and production, we wouldn't want a foreign investor to be able to take that production that is being made for Canadians in this moment of crisis and send it overseas. We also recognize that there are perhaps some startups with brilliant ideas that are facing a cash crunch right now that we would very much want to remain Canadian for the coming years, who could be exposed to predatory foreign investors. This is something that we're, of course, going to be keeping an eye on.
Thank you. Prochaine question, modérateur.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Lina Dib, La Presse canadienne. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. What can you tell us about the negotiations regarding the reconvening of Parliament next week? And if the 338 MPs have to be recalled tomorrow, whose fault will it be? Well, we are very concerned about the fact that we have not yet reached an agreement with all the opposition parties to not come back tomorrow morning. The current situation is that Parliament is supposed to resume tomorrow on the 20th of April with 338 MPs from every corner of the country and their teams, their staff, security guards and administrative personnel. And of course, we are not in a situation where that should be happening. We need a parliament that works. We need to do that in a responsible way. And that's why we've had some good conversations with most of the parties. And we're close to an agreement to be able to come back every week to ensure that they can ask questions and we can move forward with legislation. But the Conservatives are resisting that reasonable solution at this time, but we do hope that this can be resolved soon. Follow-up? Yes. So you're saying that it's the Conservatives. Now, you were talking to children earlier because it's Sunday. So what kind of image does this present if everyone is making sacrifices? And does it really show that politicians are not able to agree at such a difficult time? Well, that's a very good question, Lena. And for me, it's very frustrating because we're clearly hearing from our experts and public health authorities that we must continue to make the responsible choices and limit our movements. And it seems to me that it's fairly clear that Parliament should not return in the same manner as before, starting tomorrow. I very much believe that it's extremely important to continue to support our democracy and keep our institutions working. And I'm willing to answer questions. I take questions from the media every day, and I think opposition MPs should have the chance to ask questions as well. And that's why we made a proposal that seems very reasonable to all the other parties, but the Conservatives, I don't know. I think you'll have to ask them what their approach is and why they're being unreasonable in this situation.
We're in a situation right now where our public health authorities, our experts, and common sense tells us we need to continue to limit our movements. We need to continue to work from home. We need to continue to do everything we can to ensure that people are kept safe from further spread of this pandemic. That's why it would be irresponsible for the House of Commons to resume tomorrow as scheduled on April 20th. With 338 MPs, their staff, support staff in the House of Commons, security, people coming in from across the country at this particular point. We have proposed, and it's been accepted by, largely accepted by the other opposition parties, that we should have accountability measures. We should have Parliament that functions, but we have to do it responsibly. And that's why coming back every week for questions and for work on passing new legislation is something that I think is reasonable and is acceptable to most parties. I believe deeply in our democracy, in our democratic institutions and our principles, and it's important to be accountable. I'm perfectly happy to be taking questions every day from media, and I'm looking forward to taking questions from opposition parties. But it has to be done in a responsible way, and right now the Conservatives are not taking a responsible approach.
Thank you. Merci. Modérateur, prochaine question.
Merci, thank you. Next question, Lee Bertium, Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Yes, Prime Minister, thanks for talking to us. The NDP is asking for, in terms of parliamentary sittings, 1 in-person day and 2 virtual sittings. You have proposed only 1 virtual sitting. Can you explain why 2 is unacceptable?
I think it is important that we have in-person sittings, and I think 1 a week seems about the right number in a reduced fashion. But we also have been clear from the very beginning that we think there should be virtual sittings to allow parliamentarians from across the country who aren't within driving distance of Ottawa to continue to participate. And that's why we have been pushing for virtual sittings. We have heard from the House of Commons administration that they are incapable of standing up virtual sittings for this coming week, but we are very open to increasing them over the subsequent weeks because it's important that we be able to hear from all parliamentarians.
Follow-up?
And as a follow-up, there's a report of a deal that has been reached. Can you confirm that a deal has been reached with the opposition parties?
I can't confirm anything like that. As I came out this morning, I heard that we were very close on it, but I haven't in the past half hour got notice that there is a deal. I think it seems very, very reasonable that we can agree that there needs to be a parliament that is functioning responsibly in this difficult time. Most parties have responsible proposals forward, and I certainly hope that the Conservatives will agree to doing the responsible thing here.
Merci. Modérateur, dernière question au téléphone.
La prochaine question, Raymond Filion, TVA. À vous la parole.
TVA.
Oui, bon dimanche, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Les séances virtuelles.
Now, the virtual sittings, what would they look like in concrete terms, Mr. Trudeau? Well, there are various proposals that the House of Commons is looking at now. The idea is for members of Parliament across the country to make speeches and ask questions via video conferencing with the same rights and ability to speak as people currently have inside the House of Commons. There would be some MPs in the House and other MPs attending virtually. But the technical and technological part of this is still being worked on, and that's why the House of Commons has asked for more time to get this ready. Now, in your speech, you said that thousands of families are going through a terrible time, and Premier Legault said yesterday that his government was not properly prepared for this pandemic. You've said in the past that there will be a time for a post-mortem, but after a month of this crisis, there are questions being asked across the country. Do you think that your government was adequately prepared for this pandemic? Well, I think that when we're in the middle of a crisis and we're seeing the kind of tragedies we're witnessing, we can never say that we were fully prepared. And we will certainly learn to be better prepared the next time, if there are other times, and of course we hope not. But at the same time, we know that Canadians and the different levels of government and organizations and everyone have come together to try and put in place measures to protect people and slow the spread of this virus in a positive way compared to other countries. But even if we end up having a better history than other countries, let's not forget that this is a terrible tragedy for too many families out there, and we all have a responsibility to do our very best to ensure that we come out of this tragedy and this crisis without too many additional tragedies. Louis Blouin, Radio-Canada, could you tell me why 3 in-person sittings per week with reduced numbers is unreasonable? Well, I think we know that all parliamentarians cannot return to the House of Commons. There are people who live in provinces that are far away from Ottawa and cannot return. And that's why we've been saying it's very important to have virtual sittings so that people can participate in order to represent their community during this crisis. At the same time, being there to answer questions regularly is also important for our democracy and for Canadians. It's fine to take media questions here. I do that just about every day, but parliamentarians also have a role to play. And the proposal we made for a session or a sitting every week was accepted by most of the parties as being a reasonable compromise during this crisis.
I think it's extremely important that we remember that people are elected to Parliament in every corner of this country to be their community's voice in Parliament. And that's why, particularly in a time of crisis, it is important to look at virtual ways that allow members from every corner of the country to engage in parliamentary debate and discussion, and not just those who have the opportunity or the proximity to be around the National Capital Region. That's why we've been pushing the virtual sittings. We know that accountability is important, and taking questions every day from the media is a good thing, but it is also important that parliamentarians and opposition politicians get to ask questions of the government, which is why we've proposed that the Parliament sit every week in a reduced fashion, and that is a proposal that was accepted by most parties. The Conservatives still need to work on it a little bit in terms of their own reflection.
Est-ce que vous seriez ouvert quand les outils virtuels seront disponibles? Est-ce qu'il y a plusieurs
open to there being several virtual sittings per week once that technology is available, 3 or 4, for example, because right now the opposition parties cannot ask you to account every single day. And that's why they're unhappy. Would you be in favor of several virtual sittings? I can tell you that the proposals made by the opposition parties and the issues they are raising in terms of criticizing the government are, heard in the media, and we have adjusted our proposal and are trying to ensure that we're doing everything we can to respond to real needs across the country. country. We are always open to a functioning parliament. I think it's extremely important that be the case, but it has to be done reasonably, and that's why we're trying to find a solution. And I can tell you that most opposition parties do agree. Only the Conservatives may force us to come back tomorrow morning with 338 members of Parliament in the House of Commons.
Ashley Burke, CBC News. You've just said that you respect Parliament, that you believe in accountability. So why is your party still haggling at the last minute over terms of this sitting? Why is this so complicated?
We have been consistent from the very beginning, from a number of days ago, where I said we have a proposal to bring back Parliament every single week and ensure that we're expanding and looking at virtual sittings as quickly as we can. This has been our position, and we're consistently on that position. Most opposition parties found this to be reasonable. There is one party, and because the House is scheduled to resume tomorrow morning, there is required to be unanimous consent by the parties to not come back tomorrow morning, and the Conservatives are not wanting to be reasonable in this, I think.
Australia and other countries are calling for an international and an independent investigation into the origins of the COVID-19 outbreak in China. You've said this is not the time to point fingers or assign blame, but are you supportive of this investigation in the future? And do you still believe China responded and reported adequately?
I think it's extremely important that we understand exactly what happened and ask really tough questions of all countries involved, including China. This is something that we need to pursue. But my priority right now, and the priority for countries around the world, needs to be doing everything we can to keep our people safe and make sure that we have the resources necessary to protect our citizens and get through this, and that will always be my focus.
We recognize that there are important questions to be asked, and there needs to be reflection on what happened and what kind of responsibilities some countries have, including China. But our priority must be how we're going to protect our own citizens now and tomorrow, how we can ensure that we have everything we need to keep ourselves safe.
Ian Wood, CTV News. Prime Minister, a correctional facility near Montreal has confirmed dozens of COVID-19 cases, and the same is true with other facilities across the country, including one near Vancouver. What are you doing to protect the incarcerated population and the corrections staff in these facilities to stop the spread of COVID-19?
From the beginning, Corrections Canada has taken measures to protect both inmates and staff in these facilities, including eliminating visits, reducing transfers, looking at measures including staggered timetables to keep inmates and staff more separate from each other, ensuring that there are different mechanisms in place, and those reflections are ongoing. We're always looking for new ways to ensure protection of Canadians in those facilities.
And some provinces have had to cut elective procedures in hospitals to prepare and manage COVID-19 patients or prepare for them. Canada already has long wait lists for some procedures. Is the federal government going to assist provinces to make sure that these existing backlogs aren't amplified once we're through this?
We have a tremendous amount of confidence that provinces are going to be able to continue to manage their healthcare systems appropriately. We sent them $500 million in new resources to ensure that they are able to continue to deal with this crisis. One of the key elements through this crisis was ensuring that if more and more people got infected, there would still be emergency beds for them. There would still be intensive care units available to them to deal with the very real challenges of COVID-19 and prevent the death rates from skyrocketing as they have in other countries where their medical systems were overwhelmed. I think Canadians understand how important it is to make it through this crisis as quickly as possible so we can get back to normal. But getting through it as quickly as possible means being very careful about what we are doing right now to maximize our opportunity to help as many Canadians if they get infected.
Prime Minister Janet Silver, Global News. In Austria, for example, they have a plan to get businesses reopened, and they're doing it in a 2-week process. They open a business, a small business, monitor for 2 weeks. If the cases don't go up, they continue then with hotels, restaurants, etc. Provinces here in Canada, there are some that are have plans that they're announcing on how they're going to do that. I'm wondering what the coordination is between your government and the provinces. Will the federal government put a plan up as well? And what are you saying in terms of which businesses should be able to reopen first and when?
Many of the decisions around what makes sense in terms of a careful restarting of the economy are much more appropriately made at the provincial level, given both provincial authorities and the reality that the shape of this pandemic is very, very different in different parts of the country. What we are working on coordinating with the provinces is a set of principles and approaches that can be applied at different moments and in different ways across the country. We want to be there to ensure that there is testing capacity, that we are supporting on contact tracing, that we are remaining consistent in the messages that Canadians are hearing from the different orders of government across the country about how to be very, very careful to not allow for a resurgence of COVID-19 just as restrictions start being eased. These conversations are very much live with the provinces right now. We are listening very carefully to what experts and looking very carefully at what is working and has worked in other jurisdictions and seeing how and if that can be adapted to us. We've recognized from the beginning that we have been slightly slower. We were able to hold off the pace of the virus in Canada for a few more weeks than many other places, and therefore we can take advantage of learning what works in different situations to adapt it to Canada. We are being extremely thoughtful about that easing, and again, people need to know it's not going to suddenly reopen in any part of the country overnight to what it was before. We're going to have to be very, very careful, very gradual, very progressive if we are to prevent the kind of resurgence that would send us all back into lockdown as we were before. We want to make sure that what we are doing now is not for nothing, that we manage to get through this with the kind of containment and control approaches that the proper measures will allow for. Okay. Nous savons
We know that people want to know when this is going to end and when we can relax certain restrictions. But we have a responsibility to be very careful, to do things properly and gradually, and to remain extremely vigilant. Of course, we're taking inspiration from what is being done elsewhere in the world and their success, and possibly their challenges as well. At different times in different parts of the country, there will be choices being made, and not necessarily the same choices, but as the federal government, we are trying to coordinate our efforts so that the underlying principles with respect to that gradual recovery will be applied the same way across the country.
An outbreak of COVID-19 at a northern Alberta oil sands camp has sickened at least 12 people around Alberta, and reports of other cases in other parts of the country from that. Should measures be in place to ensure that returning workers isolate whether or not they have symptoms?
I think that's a decision for the government of Alberta, but certainly we all understand how important it is to keep workers in essential businesses, workers who continue to work, as safe as possible. Safety of workers, of their families as well, needs to be the primary consideration of any government, and I certainly expect that to be the case in this one as well.
Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui met fin à la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.
Merci tout le monde.
The Prime Minister of Canada with his daily briefing, daily update on his government's approach to fighting the pandemic. I'll bring in the CBC's David Cochrane. A couple of points I would make, David, from listening to the Prime Minister. There is no one, not any party, that is asking for all MPs to return tomorrow. So that just in case people got that impression. And there is nothing that would require all 338 MPs to come to Ottawa tomorrow. They could continue to do their parliamentary work in their ridings if they chose not not to come. But further to that, as he was speaking, the NDP made clear that no matter what happens tomorrow, there will only be 3 of their MPs here tomorrow. So I just don't want people to go away with the impression that there will suddenly, if there's no deal, be 338 MPs here with all their staff and the staff inside the House of Commons, because that's certainly the impression the Prime Minister left with people, and I think it's the wrong impression.
Yeah, they're trying to wedge the Conservatives there a little bit. We heard the language from the Prime Minister saying the Conservatives are not taking a responsible approach in terms of how Parliament would resume, wanting a minimum of 3 in-person sittings a week so they can have question period as much as possible during this pandemic, wanting to hold the government to account for the decisions it's making and the actions it is taking or not taking. All the other parties want less than that, or none of that really, with the Greens wanting to go completely virtual and the Liberals and the NDP kind of having an agreement to do 1 day in person and then 2 days virtual. And no, there is no requirement for all 338 to come back, and nobody necessarily wants that. But absent an agreement, it is possible that an undetermined number of MPs could come back to Parliament and insist on taking their seat. We've seen some unpredictability. Even when there was an agreement to pass the emergency benefits several weeks ago, Scott Reid for the Conservatives showed up to protest the way this was being handled, unhappy even with his own leadership's conduct in this thing. So negotiations are continuing with public pronouncements being made by political leaders. Trudeau saying the Conservatives are not taking the responsible approach. The Conservatives essentially saying Trudeau's not taking the accountable approach. And if he can take questions from reporters every day and ministers can hold news conferences every day sitting next to Dr. Tam and Dr. New, then why can't they just go down the hall into the House of Commons and take some questions and answer some and give some answers to the duly elected members of the House of Commons? So there is no consensus on this. There is a general consensus that Parliament should continue to function in some fashion. The bulk of the parties, which is the majority of the MPs, think the Conservatives are asking for too much. The Conservatives saying the government giving too little.
Okay, David Cochrane here in Ottawa. Thank you for your help with our coverage. Appreciate that. And I'm sure we'll have an update on whether Parliament is going to return in some way by the end of the day. We'll stay tuned for that. But let's go now to our breaking news in Nova Scotia, because the Prime Minister also talked about that, saying that he thanks the police and the people in the area for following instructions, after RCMP now saying that a suspect in an active shooter investigation is in custody. We are also told there are multiple victims. Shayna Luck is live in Great Village. That's not far from where those events unfolded. Shayna, what can you tell us?
Well, Rosie, as you said, the shooter, who's been identified by the RCMP as 51-year-old, excuse me, his last name is Wortman, and it's been such a morning, Rosie, that his first name, Gabriel Wortman, thank you. It escaped me for the moment. But as you said, it all began last night in Portapique, which is about 5 kilometers, probably about 10 kilometers, it's about 10 minutes up the road from where I'm standing. I'm standing in Great Village right now. Portapique is not too far away. It began last night around 11:30 with some kind of violent incident causing multiple victims. We don't know yet whether those victims are dead or whether they are injured. We don't know how many of them, whether multiple victims means 2 or more. We do know that probably about an hour ago, maybe a little bit more than that, Wortman was apprehended by the RCMP on Highway 102. He was heading towards Halifax and Dartmouth. I can tell you a little bit more about Wortman now. We know that he is a denturist. The RCMP at one point had said he might have access to a replica or some car that looked like an RCMP car or an RCMP uniform, but they were very clear he does not work for the RCMP. We know that he is a denturist. We know that he owns multiple properties around Nova Scotia, including several properties in Portapique. We know as well that Gabriel Wortman has a business in Dartmouth, a denturist business. So we can tell you that he is. We've been speaking over the phone with people in the community who tell us that he was fairly well known within Portapique. That some people are saying that he was well liked. So we can tell you that this is certainly an unfolding incident. We expect to get more from the RCMP this afternoon.
Do we have a time yet for that, Shayna? Any sense of when that might happen?
No, we don't know yet. The RCMP have been giving us information all morning. They've been using Twitter to get that out there, and they tell us that a press conference is coming, but no time on that as of yet.
So I appreciate the new details that you found out about the suspect, Gabriel Wortman. We were talking to a gentleman in Portapique earlier who also says that he saw fires, that he heard propane blowing, maybe propane attached to the homes, but didn't really have a sense of how things were unfolding. I just want to reiterate that point, though, about the RCMP vehicle and potentially uniform, because at one point the suspect did change cars. So can you just tell people what we know about that part?
Yes, absolutely. So we know that the RCMP used Twitter, as I was saying. They've been using that a lot. They tweeted out that the suspect was traveling in an RCMP, what looked like an RCMP vehicle, and what looked like an RCMP uniform. We really don't know too much about how he got those items or where exactly they came from, whether they were legitimate items or not. But he was traveling in an RCMP vehicle, and then shortly after that, the RCMP told us that he had switched to a silver SUV, a Chevy Tracker. So we believe that's how it played out.
Shayna Luck, thank you very much for your reporting from Great Village, Nova Scotia. We'll keep coming to you through the day for more details. We are going to end now our special coverage of the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, but we will continue, of course, to track the breaking news out of Nova Scotia. Multiple victims in an active shooting investigation. The suspect now in custody. I am Rosemary Barton. Michael Serapio picks up our coverage on CBC News Network. Thanks for watching.
You're watching CBC News Network. Thank you for joining us today. We are also streaming live worldwide on the CBC News app and CBCNews.ca. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Well, as you just saw, the Prime Minister has given his daily briefing on the federal response to the pandemic. We are also today